Hey guys, welcome to Season 12 of Project Diablo 2. This is Dinger. In this video, I'm going to be doing a showcase on the Fireworks Barbarian and how to set him up properly to run a T4 map. If you are new to Project Diablo 2, you probably have seen all of the different maps that are available to run as endgame content. This is very similar to what you see in Path of Exile or other action RPGs. You might have experienced some of this as well in Diablo 3. T4 maps are special, unique maps that you make by cubing a T3 map with a Horadrim Scarab, and it's going to turn it into these highly unique, typical group group dungeons where the way that these are designed is you need multiple characters, multiple classes, multiple builds, and then you have to very strategically, systematically move through the map to clear them. Um, this build is capable of running these by itself, and in fact, if you are going to attempt to run a T4 map with a Fireworks Barbarian, I would highly recommend that you don't bring anyone else with you. As soon as you add more people to the game, the health pools of the monsters go up dramatically, and your clear speed is going to spiral into the toilet. So let's talk a little bit about stats and skills here for just a moment. If you saw my build guide for the Fireworks Barbarian for Season 12, we got Dinger in here again. It's the exact same Barbarian. So strength, dex, what you need for your gear, everything else into vitality, nothing into energy. I am recommending this season for a Fireworks Barbarian that you max increase speed, both for the additional run walk, but it also helps with hitting the higher frame increased attack speed on double throw, which is what we're going to want to hit. Max attack speed on double throw is 6 frames, which is about 3.33 attacks per second, in case you weren't sure. So increased speed, throwing mastery, frenzy, and double throw are going to be the 4 skills we max out. 1 point down to leap, 1 point down the Warcry tree to make sure we can do the battle command, orders, and shout stack. And then all of the additional points I have sunk into deep wounds just for some additional damage from open wounds. You could very easily shift that over into natural resistances or into iron skin. In fact, that might actually even be a better plan. But I have not had any issues running T4 maps with this setup. And so that's what I've got for you here. For the items on this build, it's all the same things that I've shown before. Wind Rune Word in each hand, Principal Chest Piece, Carrion Wind Ring, and then Hellmouth Gauntlets. So the core of the build are all still the same. Gore Riders on the boots still, nothing changed there. But my amulet, helmet, belt, and my other ring have all changed, and I'll talk about that here for a second. So once I talk about some of the monsters that are on the map, having slain monsters rest in peace somewhere in your kit is very nice from a quality of life perspective. Nature's Peace makes it easy to get that done. Plus, it helps with overstacking your resistances, which any additional resistances that you can bring into a T4 map is very helpful. I would say the only required resistance that you want absolutely stacked is cold. There are monsters in the T4 maps that cast Frozen Orb and Blizzard, and those can be an instant death sentence if you do not have maximum cold resistance. So we've got Nature's Peace on the ring here. If you have looked at the wiki describing what you can and cannot do to the monsters in a T4 map, the wiki will tell you that you cannot confuse them. And from what I have seen, that confusion chance is just, it's so reduced that if you were a necromancer trying to cast confusion, you could never cast it fast enough to make it viable. That's not a problem with a double throw barbarian. And in fact, because there are so many enemies that are physically immune, the number of times that we are going to cast confuse as we clear this map, you're basically casting confuse all the time, which means that this helmet alone is going to give you tons of breathing space. It's also going to help with your damage output as the monsters that you do confuse turn on each other and deal some damage that way. Before I started running Nature's Peace in this, I had been using Grimward as a solution for the unholy corpses that come back to life. You kill a bunch of them, you go through a town portal back to town for something, you come back in, and then you get clapped by them. So I had been using Grimward to clear the bodies as needed. I still have this on this helmet because that's how I was dealing with it before, but now, like I said, Nature's Peace makes it easy. You do not have to run a Nature's Peace here. You could pick any other ring that you'd like to have, totally up to you. And then you can just use Grimoire to get rid of those corpses as needed. My amulet here is really nothing fancy. It is a little strange, maybe one of my precious gems that I've crafted this season, because it looks more like a ring than it does an amulet. But this thing is going to give us some additional escaping power with charges of teleport, which we may actually need that. It's going to resolve our mana recovery issues with the stolen per hit. It's got a little bit of additional run walk and faster hit recovery. You would be just as successful using a cat's eye, or really any other amulet that you might want to use. I ran a couple of maps with this one for a while right here, just because it had the additional defense to missiles, which is nice. That stacks with your Carrion Wind having additional defense versus missiles. The the spear chuckers on this map can be a pain in the butt, so having some additional chance to avoid that can come in handy. One thing I do want to point out, normally for a fireworks build, you do want to run Atmos Scarab. I do not recommend that because we're not going to be breaking any immunes. That is not how this works. We're going to waste 0 time breaking immunes, and you do not want the amplify damage interfering with the casts of Confuse. So we're not using Atmos in this at all. Right now, in order to solve for the cannot be frozen situation and to give us some additional health, I have just a Triangle's Belt. I used this quite a bit last season to resolve this. Now, let's be honest, gang. If you have better corruptions, wonderful. You can get cannot be frozen somewhere else. You can figure out a different way to get your mana stuff resolved. There's still ways to optimize this build, but that's not necessarily the point. For those of you who are familiar with T4 dungeons and have run them before, they're a great source of experience. They're a great way to get level 92 Grand Charms. I've had several maps that I've run where I collect 7 or 8 Grand Charms and roll them all into +1, 30, 40 life Grand Charms. So it's a great place to get Grand Charms. The bosses on a T4 map do drop a ton of loot, so there is some viability to running T4s. The thing that makes them successful or not is how quickly you can do them. In a group, you can smash a T4 relatively quickly. I have had quite a range on this particular build just because you have the RNG of which monsters get spawned in. You have the modifiers of the map itself. There's a lot of factors that can play into this. I've actually tried to record this video a couple times this season, but I keep getting the server down bug. So we're going to take another stab at it here. So all of that being said, why would you want to run a T4 dungeon in the first place? Because you can, and because not many builds do enough mixed damage where they can successfully run them by themselves. So if you're looking for some guide that's going to teach you how to do a T3 dungeon in 4 minutes so you can get rich, this is just not that kind of build. This is about challenging yourself. This is about taking full advantage of the game's content. In fact, before I started running these with this Barbarian, I'd never even attempted a T4 dungeon. I think I opened it once, walked in, died, and never came back. So my very first time clearing a T4 dungeon was using this build. So I know there's some players that love the bosses and they love to clear those. And I know one guy right now that's cleared Declone like 200 times this season, and he loves doing it. For me, this is the challenge of the game. So to finish out with the charms here, forgot to talk about that, and then we'll talk about Bob, Barbarian Torch, Annihilus, and then I am still stacked out with all of my Poison Small Charms. This is going to add our 4th damage type into the build. Poison is not a huge factor on a T4 map, but having the mixed damage is nice. Leaning even harder into physical damage on a T4 map really doesn't make a difference in clear speed, because this build is not relying on our actual damage per throw here. Obviously it helps, but we're not relying on that. We're relying on the activation of our skills on our items. And so leaning even more into the physical damage here doesn't necessarily work to our advantage. Poison is the mix-up that I've added to this that feels good when I run the map. And then I'm still using the Venom proc on a Treachery to pre-buff. Right now I'm sitting at just under 40,000 in poison damage. When I go and finish the pre-buff with Treachery and get Venom activated, I'm at just about 1250 max side for poison damage per throw, per bounce. So it may not seem like much. 16 bounces later, that's spreading quite a bit of poison damage around the map, and it helps with mixing up. I do still like buffing with the Demon Limb. You're going to see me do that a ton on this map. Not so much for the additional fire damage, which is negligible. Let's go ahead and activate that here. Yeah, 300 additional fire damage, not much to write home about, right? But it's the attack rating conversation, because we want to make sure that we're hitting. The more we hit, the more we bounce, the more we bounce, the more we cast, the more we cast, the faster we clear. So that's the setup that we would like to have there. So looking at Uncle Bob over here, Bob, we want to make sure he's capped on resistances. We want to make sure that we hit the breakpoints on physical damage reduction. Vamp Gaze on the helm with a 15% increased attack speed jewel. Shaft stop here. This is a low roll shaft stop with a Thul in it because I needed to make sure that my cold resist was tapped out. String of ears for the lifesteal and the PDR. Boots out over here are just some tri-resist boots with faster hit recovery and poison length reduction. Drax for some additional life stolen. And after lots and lots of testing, I'm settled that this is the best weapon if you're going to run a T4 map for your mercenary. It makes him so much tankier. Yildisian's Awakening also allows you to very easily hit the 8-frame attack point for him, 15% from the helmet, and then 100 on the weapon, which means that Bob over here, at least on the enemies he can lifesteal from and mana steal from, he will. Having the energy shield and the additional mana means he can take 5 or 6 hits instead of 1 or 2. And so making him tankier makes everything we're going to do on the map that much easier. Now, I do want to point out, you're not going to be able to make a mercenary that's so tanky that he can just stand there and just get beat on by the enemies in a T4 map. The reason he's going to live is this is going to make him survive long enough that I can heal him with Holy Bolt. So there's a ton of repositioning that you need to do in a T4 map. To help with that, you will need a Naj's Puzzler or another source of teleport in your build, because you always want to be behind your mercenary. If you're attacking, he should be in front of you because you absolutely have to heal him. Naj's Puzzler is a great budget option for doing this because Blink is going to recharge on its own. You get 3 charges of it, and that's typically plenty for moving around. The additional charges of teleport that I have on my amulet are my get out of jail free card in case things get really bad. So do you need an amulet like this? No. Go find a Naj's Puzzler for a couple of Worldstone shards, or if you already have one, you're already ready to go. But you will definitely want that on swap. Let's talk about crafting the maps a little bit now. Actually, let's put that in there so I don't lose it. Map selection is critical for running a T4 map, and I'm going to switch screens a little bit here, and we're going to do some handy-dandy spreadsheets and wiki conversation here for just a moment. So if you're not familiar with the T4 maps, there are 3 of them. Plains of Torment, Sanctuary of Sin, and then the Steppes of Daken-Shar. And each of these are a 2-tier dungeon where you typically have a starting area followed by a dungeon area. Each of these have their own separate bosses, and each of these essentially have the same cast of characters, the same cast of monsters that you're going to be dealing with. Now, I do want to point out that the thing that is different between these is that the bosses are different. So the boss you fight in Plains of Torment is not the bosses you'll fight in Sanctuary of Sin, which is not the boss that you'll fight in Steppes of Daken-Shar. So that is a factor in selecting which map you would want to run with this build. As of right now, because of the bosses, I actually try to avoid the Steppes of Daken-Shar. For the first boss that you fight, he is going to spawn an endless number of minions. And it can be incredibly difficult to weave through those minions to actually get to him. It's totally doable, but I have had some runs that have ended because there's literally 500 monsters between myself and him, and he's spawning them faster than I can kill them. So I personally try to avoid the Steppes of Daken-Shar. Sanctuary of Sin and Plains of Torment I would put on the same level. Plains of Torment actually works to our favor because the boss you fight here actually spawns totems that you can bounce your weapons from. So the first boss in this area is very easy to eat through. The second boss, not so hard either. Sanctuary of Sin I actually like for its layout. You have lots of very wide open spaces where it's easy to round up monsters. Plains of Torment is a little bit more jagged, and there's lots of holes in the map itself, which sometimes can be a pain in the butt. you'll have gaps where your weapon will just evaporate because, video games. So dealing with that sometimes can be a pain in the butt on the Plains of Torment, but I do like the bosses better on Plains of Torment. So it's really a toss-up between Plains and Sanctuary of Sin for what you might want to run. In talking through the actual immunities on the map, I do want to share this for just a quick second. T4 maps have numerous immunities, regardless of which one that you're going to run. Whether that's physical, magical, fire, you're going to bump into immunities of all types. Most of the monsters have more than one immunity, which is why it's designed to be run with a group. Our build right now is running primarily based upon the procs and the damage that we're going to cast from it. And on average, this is my damage output per attack with the current setup here. So by and large, 70% of my damage is physical. We've got a tiny slice of fire and about 20% magical. And that 20% magical from Holy Bolt is the thing that makes T4 maps possible. Because if you look at the total number of monsters who are actually immune to magic on a T4 map, guess what? There's very few. So magic is actually the key to opening up this entire thing and clearing a T4 map. Now, that being said, we are still primarily doing physical damage, and physical damage is still very important. So don't take that as me saying, hey, we need to go, full bore into buffing our magic damage. It really doesn't make as much of a difference as you think, because we have so many enemies that are physically immune. That means that our axes are going to bounce even more and produce even more holy bolts. So it actually works to our advantage that there are as many types of physical immune enemies on the map for us to deal with. So just a little bit of details on that. Who doesn't like a good pie chart in the middle of a YouTube video, right? Okay, let's get that out of the way. In discussing the enemies that you're going to bump into on a T4 map, there's really only 3 types that you need to be absolutely aware of what's going on with them. Bloodbringers, Blunderbores, and then our, excuse me, and then the Night Lords. And I'll talk about each of them for a second here. Bloodbringers look like the Act 5, the big giant guys that can sometimes have the gremlins that ride on their shoulders. They are massively immune to physical damage, and they can one-shot your mercenary. They are wonderful if you can get a pack of them confused. They will actually help quite a bit with clearing things out. Blunderbores are just as dangerous as Bloodbringers. They hit very hard, and they can stun lock you. So if a Blunderbore walks up to you, you got to get out of the way. And then the Death Lords, which are the Act 3 casters, they cast Blizzard and they cast Frozen Orb, both of which can be a death sentence if you are not capped on your cold resistance, both for you and for your mercenary. So you can actually skate through this without having maxed reses. I know that sounds crazy, but not cold. Do not skimp on cold. You will be dead from the first Frozen Orb that hits you. So talking about maps themselves, I want to give a little bit of detail here regarding certain things you should or shouldn't look for. Right now, I have unfortunately exhausted my existing inventory of Scarabs just making these maps. And sadly, I rolled five Daken-Shars and 2 Sanctuary of Sins. And there are certain prefixes and suffixes that are basically a no-go. And so I want to talk about that a little bit here. So if you roll a T4 map and you get faster hit recovery penalties, put it in the garbage can. This build right now only has 12% faster hit recovery, which is not much, which means that if I run this map, I'm going to be at negative hit recovery, which means if I get touched, I'm stun locked. If that happens, it's over. The other the other modifiers that are on this map, really not too bad. I'll talk about absorption here in a second. This one does have 10% fire absorb, but hit recovery is a death sentence. As far as I'm concerned, that map right there is a brick. I'm not going to run that one. Maybe in a group you could run that where you're not getting hit all the time, but there's only me and Bob as the targets here, so we're going to take some hits. So that one's out of the way. Looking at this next one here that we rolled, this one looks like it could be a viable candidate. On the plus side, it only has a 13% buff to maximum life. Some of these have 20% or more, so this means we can clear a little bit quicker. This one does have players drain life, which can be kind of annoying. We have plenty of life steal on this build, so it's not really a problem as long as you're hitting enemies that are not immune to physical. And monsters have reduced physical damage here. You're going to bump into something like that. It doesn't have any absorbs to get in the way. It doesn't have any faster hit recovery penalties for you, and it doesn't have any faster hit recovery buffs for them. So this one right now is top of the list for what I might run. Let's go to the next one here and take a peek at this. We've got 20% increased maximum life. We got fire absorb on this one, reduced physical damage. Again, we're looking in the clear for faster hit recovery, so that one makes the cut. Let's go to the next one here. Increased life. If you have a map that rolls with any magic absorb, it's a brick. Don't run it. You're wasting your time. It will gimp your holy bolt damage and really slow you down. And this one has both magic and fire absorb. So that one is a brick. We're not going to run that. Looking at this next one here. Cold damage, not looking too bad. This one again has fire absorb, not a big deal. And it only has 15%. And this one I had corrupted, so monster density is a little higher. So this one can definitely make the cut. We'll see. We'll have to be careful though, because it does have deadly strike. And with this build, you can take a couple of hits. I don't know, that might make this one a little too dangerous. Let's look at our Sanctuary of Sin ones here. Okay, this one has minus 40% faster hit recovery. That is a brick. We're not doing that one. This one right here, it doesn't have a faster hit recovery penalty, and it doesn't have any absorbs. But if you look right in the center, it says monsters have 97% faster hit recovery. We do not want that. And the reason why is that means you cannot stun lock enemies using Molten Boulder or just hitting them. And oftentimes you will have monsters have 100% faster hit recovery. And so you end up in a situation where no matter how hard you're hitting them, they're always capable of hitting you back, and we don't want that. So this one right here is also a brick. And we're going to cube a couple more here live. We'll see what we get. Maybe we'll get a Plains of Torment. Sweet! First one, Plains of Torment. Let's see what we got. Cannot be frozen. 95% faster hit recovery. Ah, what a stinker. Let's try again. Got a Sanctuary of Sin. Players have minus 37% faster hit recovery. Ah, and this would have been a good one too, with the increased max life at 11% only. Oh, this is a double decker. It's got monsters have bonus faster hit recovery, and we have a penalty. That's definitely a brick. All right. Daken-Shar again. Another 39% faster hit recovery penalty. Only 11% on the increased maximum life. That would have been a good one. What else we got here? Another Plains. Ah, another faster hit recovery penalty. Increased maximum life. Not too bad. And let's see here. Minus 22% all resistances. I'm so glad I got a roll with that. Yeah, you don't want to run that. A debuff like that to your resistances means you cannot cap out your cold resistance, so that's a brick. So now you can understand a little bit as to why I have so many of these maps and some of them I don't run. So right now, we just cubed 5. I got 1 that I can run, and I'm sitting on 8 other maps that I likely will never touch, lest I waste hours and hours trying to do a no-hit run of a T4 dungeon, which is crazy. So in the spirit of trying to show what an ideal setup would be, I think I am at least going to attempt the Plains of Torment. I know it does have the 95% faster hit recovery on the monsters, but the fact that we don't have a penalty here is working to our advantage, and there's no absorb. I do see that there's a 31% increased maximum life, so maybe it's a toss-up. Maybe I will pick one of my Daken-Shars instead. So that's just a little bit of the discussion of what you're looking for on these maps. Most of the other modifiers really don't matter that much for what we're doing, primarily because the additional damage that they're doing, as far as we're concerned, if they touch us, they're going to kill us anyway. So trying to balance out some sort of defense plan against that is just a waste of time. So I am going to pause here on the main part of the video and add another one in here. I know we've gone for quite a few minutes on the discussion, and I'm going to run a couple of these maps without narration. Thanks. All right, gang. I'm going to cut this in here. This is my post-clear run This particular run of Steps of Daken-Shar took me almost an hour, a little bit longer than an hour. Like I mentioned before when I was discussing the ideal modifiers for the map, unfortunately, this one did roll with a very high monster bonus, excuse me, a very high bonus to faster hit recovery for the monsters. You'll see that if you watch any of the clear of this. You can't stun lock them, you can't get them to stop attacking, and so the progression when you have that is just much slower. So full transparency on that, this run did take a little bit longer. As far as the items we pulled out of here, I got a Reaper's Toll, Bull Kathos Tribal Guardian, Griswold's Plate, 3-socketed, 2 to Paladin skills, Razor's Edge, we got a Sigurd's Staunch, Raven Lore, Triangle's Belt, Mav's Belt. We got a couple of decent small charms in here. Life, max damage, not too bad on those. We got a low rune, which was really nice. And then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 grand charms. The summoning skills and the cold skills rolled naturally. And then I did some re-rolls on these at the tail end of the video. We also got some Grave Palms. So in terms of total clear speed, oh, I forgot the Rib Cracker. Love Rib Crackers. Total clear speed on this, like I said, is very slow. It's one of the reasons why I highly recommend you avoid those faster hit recovery maps. It just really slows you down when you cannot stun lock the enemies. So I am going to record another one of these, probably from the Sanctuary of Sin maps that I have here. It'll probably be another slow one because I'm fairly certain most of these have hit recovery for monsters. You can still clear them, like you'll see in this video. It just takes so much longer when you cannot stun them. Additionally, I'll probably have to go buy some more Scarabs because I think I only have one of these that I can potentially run. So we'll see what happens here. If you made it this far, thanks so much for watching the video. The rest of it is just going to be the full clear of the map. I'm going to do it at regular speed. So if you want to speed it up, you're more than welcome to. Thanks so much. So for the general purpose here, when you first go through the portal, you want to full clear around the portal as best as you can. This helps with any sort of runbacks that you might need to do. There's nothing worse than getting into a map like this, dying, and then realizing you can't even go back through the portal to get your body. So that's exactly what happens here. So generally speaking, when you're clearing these areas, there's going to be a ton of physical immune enemies. And those are the ones that you're going to want to target the most. Anytime there is a Bloodbringer on screen, that should always be your target. You're going to get the most bounces out of them. You also want to take the time to strategically move your mercenary. If you're like me, I tend to get a lot of latency. And so anytime I see a Bloodbringer that is walking in place, I almost always teleport. Mainly because the number of times where their visuals haven't updated, and in reality, he's standing right next to me and he's about to kill me. So, Bloodbringers, you have to be very aware of where they are and target those first. So generally speaking, when you're on the first part of the map here and you get to the bottom of the stairs, this is the first kill box in this particular map. As many enemies as you can guide back towards the stairs ensures that you can clear them quickly, and at the same time that you can remain relatively safe. I always like to clear the area that's just north of the stairs as well, because then that becomes a nice place to hide. Drop a town portal, you'll see me use that a little bit here too. But clearing the stairs, once you get up there, becomes a nice little nest from which you can funnel the rest of the monsters in. Okay, so one of the general strategies that you use on a T4 map with this build is if you spend a bunch of time killing individual enemies, you're not really going to progress as quickly as you could. So generally speaking, what you want to do is run in and grab as many of them as possible. Excuse me, the fireworks setup here works best against large groups of enemies. And so as many of them as you can get together, and then find a nice corner to nestle yourself in and then get to work, typically works the best. Now, bear in mind, these guys basically cannot be sent into hit recovery. So I have to play even more cautious because they are always going to be attacking. Here's maybe the best example in this run of rounding up enemies properly, right at the base of the second set of stairs in the first area here. I managed to get almost all of them aggroed and pulled in, which then led to a much faster clear time in this area than maybe what you saw a little bit earlier in the video. You can also see here how confusion plays a big part in this. Sometimes a confused enemy can also work to drag in the other nearby enemies. So there'll be some times in the video where I will be attacking enemies intentionally further away in the hopes that the confused enemy will actually pull in the others. Okay, so here's where I took my first death in this run. I got just a little bit too close to this champion Blunderbore pack. Like I mentioned in the discussion early on, Blunderbores and the Bloodbringers, you would like to keep as much distance as you can. Normally I try not to game dodge to get my body back when I can. I just didn't have a choice in this instance, so I had to lose some of the experience that I've soaked up. Even with Bob, as strong as he is, the amount of back and forths and bobs and weaves I would need to do here in order to get my body back just wasn't worth the time. So I did one game dodge this whole run to get my body back. Unfortunately, dealing with those enemies, it's kind of like the Bloodbringers, where if you ever see them having their move animation, but they are not actively moving, you should probably still teleport just to make sure that they are not, in fact, standing on top of you. Alright here, so we are going to do a sort of full boss discussion while this plays in the background. After you get up to the walled area and you clear out one side of it, make sure that that area is completely safe. We're going to want to use this as home base. This is where we're going to want to set up our town portal. And the reason we're trying to set up here is those demons there at the bottom are going to spawn endlessly while the boss is alive. So you need a space where you can hide, you need a place where you can reset your buffs, whatever you need to do. I do highly recommend that you go into this area with nothing but full rejuves all through your inventory as well. You will get some breathing room during the fight to refill your potion belt or whatever else you may need to do. I have had plenty of Daken-Shar maps essentially end right here because I did not position well and I could not actually get to the boss to kill him. So the boss himself, he does do some pretty darn good damage, so you want to try to keep your distance. While at the same time, you need to be close enough to him that you are directly injuring him at all times. So teleporting through that top corner I have found to be the most effective way to get to him quickly, like you see here in the video. And then from there, confusion is actually the thing that's holding the line. Unfortunately, my mercenary kind of moved out of position. I had a really good position right at the start of the fight. I was still taking some hits. But then Bob decided to migrate down to the bottom left, so I had to move around a little bit here. Skull Splitter Cyrus really is not that hard to beat. The hard part is managing his endless respawns of minions here. Now, of course, for us needing the multiple bounces, it does work to our advantage that there's always targets to bounce from. So on the one hand, this boss fight can be very tedious in that you can't get to him. On the other hand, it actually goes pretty quick once you get the proper positioning, and it's very easy to take him out. He's far easier to beat than the second boss that's in this map.
overburdened. I can't carry anymore. Greetings. Impossible. I can't. Impossible. Not enough mobs.
So here we are at the entrance to the second part of the map, and the tombs area isn't necessarily any more difficult than the first area here. Monsters are all going to be the same, strategy is still essentially the same, but this is part of why I don't actually like running Daken-Shar as a T4 map if I can avoid it, and it's because there are so many objects in this area that will block your bounces, it will block your procs, and so the repositioning during this part is just very tedious. On the plus side, the bridges tend to be the best places to fight. The channels that you need to try to target your attacks down are a little bit easier than in the larger, more open areas. With it being a bridge, it's a lot easier to make a kill box in front of you, so really directing and making your attacks more productive is a lot easier on the bridges, so that is a good thing. But you'll notice if you watch any more of this section that there are large portions of it where I was either delayed or had to reposition back to the bridge so that I could appropriately line up my effects, line up my attacks, or keep Bob alive. Working through those larger, more open areas, it's kind of luck of the draw of what you get, but you'll see the same strategy used all throughout this second area.
Afternoon.
Okay, so this is a good place as any to talk about auras on this map. As you can see, all of the mobs here have concentration aura. Sometimes you'll be lucky, sometimes you won't. I've had packs where I have had might, concentration, and fanaticism all on top of each other, which makes for a very challenging point of progression here. If you'll notice, my health keeps getting chunked, and the reason it's getting chunked is what I don't see is that on the other side of that wall further up, there's actually a unique pack that has Conviction Aura. So not only is there concentration right here, but there's Conviction Aura on the other side, and of course I'm making such a mess I can't see it. Now, this is where I do take my second death this run, because I didn't realize that. Once I figure out where the Conviction Aura is, it's a lot easier to move forward. Conviction on this map is a death sentence. It was taking my lightning and my cold resistance down to -5%. So that's just something to pay attention to. And that's the reason why I took the death. I think you can even hear the Conviction Aura activate and see my confusion in the video as to how the heck did I die there. But that's exactly what happened. So here we are on the bridge right before the second boss fight, and I want to point out that square of water that's at the base of the bridge right there near the fire. That square of water is a great place for you to drag the boss to if you can. And when you're fighting him, there's two things you want to keep in mind. The first is his firestorm, which has a color palette that is eerily similar to the ground that you're standing on, which makes it hard to see. Right now, I'm trying to use my little confuse trick to drag him out to get him away from the rest of the monsters that are in the area with him, which is why I continued to attack here off screen. Sometimes you can at least get a bead on where he is because suddenly his firestorm will activate and you can tell exactly where he is. His firestorm is very damaging. If you stand in it, you're probably going to die. So as soon as it comes out, you need to move out of the way. The other thing he does is he throws a shock web, which his shock web is basically invisible while I'm attacking because there's too many particle effects. So that's something to keep in mind here, which is part of why I died. I was standing on his shock web. That is the third and final death that I take this particular run. Now, Naz the Cursed is really not that hard to beat. If you can lead him back to the bridge, that works out really well. I also highly recommend, again, switching over to having the full rejuve set up in your belt and on your person. If you get him into a good position, which is really not that hard to do, but if you do manage to get him into a good position, you can take him out fairly quickly. The other thing that I recommend here is while you are fighting him, rather than standing behind your mercenary, you want to be perpendicular to him. And not dissimilar to how the D-clone fights, Nash will, or rather, the closer you are to Nash, the less likely he is to use his shockweb or to use his firestorm. And you'll see that in the fight here in just a second. I do manage to pull him back. I think I get him almost all of the way down before I had to reset and get my mercenary back. Sometimes Bob does better with tanking him than other times. Unfortunately, he just wasn't being aggressive enough for me to drag him back. But we did pretty well here. I think overall things went just fine with clearing out the boss. Outside of his firestorm and his shockweb, there's really not much to him. Just let your mercenary tank him and pound away until he's dead.